Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Your Highness, co-chairs, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Devoting the 10th session of the World Urban Forum to the theme of cities, of opportunities, connecting culture and innovation is a call for urgency of the challenge of cities and the culture of sharing embodied by UAE in general and the leadership of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed in particular. To meet the challenge posed by the scale and scope of urbanization in the context of global uncertainty, disruptive and destructive change requires a true sense of urgency. As 3/4 of the world's estimated 9 billion people by 2050 are projected to live in cities, the scale of the task does not allow for complacency. For the first time in human history, the absolute majority of humanity will be urban. The scope of the task is equally big. Based on a study of 500 cities of over 750,000 inhabitants, in 21 megacities of over 10 million people, shall develop the following 6 archetypes: underdeveloped urban centers, underprivileged crowded cities, developing mega-hubs, sprawling metropolises, urban powerhouses in prosperous communities. We are here today in an urban powerhouse, but if the former 4 are to embark on the pathways of transformation to the latter 2, and all 6 are to embrace the goal of becoming compact, sustainable cities between now and 2050, urgent, systematic, and global action is required. In a fast-changing global context. Environmental change, with the Earth currently on the unfortunate course of becoming 2 degrees warmer by 2050, turns the current urban planning assumptions regarding energy, transport, and water on their head. The 4th industrial revolution is disrupting the definition of urban well-being and human well-being in general. The 5th wave of global violence changes and poses unprecedented risk to urban security, public spaces, and freedom of association and travel. Reemergence of big power rivalry makes for uncertainty in a time when cooperation at the regional and global level is most needed. The silver lining is that we have the tools and the repertoire of techniques to solve the problems. Hence the need to focus on the title of this forum. Doing so, however, requires taking a nuanced approach to culture. Culture is a universe of agreement and disagreement, embodied in implicit rules of the game and explicit governing codes, and ever-changing. Cultures of communities of knowledge, expertise poses the most significant constraint. What has worked in the last 60 years is not going to work in the next 30 years. Organizations like UN Habitat are most in need of cultural change. Culture of the firms. Most firms have been on unsustainable paths and been providing the wrong advice. Culture of organizations, particularly global organizations like the IMF and the World Bank, with assumptions that are still reflection of a different world. Culture of the state. We need to differentiate between the culture of the state and culture of the people. Blaming the people is reductionist. And civilizational communities of affinity and identity must be differentiated. If we want to see culture at work, look at the Sheikh Zayed Mosque, a grand synthesis of all that is best in Islamic civilization. Here, there's also need to differentiate between media in terms of the technology, because when we talk about digital gap, we're talking about technology. When we are talking about convergence, it's the cultural codes that govern the technologies. In turning to innovation, the first challenge is to move from the culture of urban planning to design thinking. And when we talk about planning, we think we have the solutions. When we think about designs, we forge the solutions together and take account of the changing context. From the energy, the wasteful energy and wasteful water treatments or transport that is directed towards elites rather than masses. The second aspect of innovation is to harness collective intelligence. Modern technology and ancient ways of consultation have made it possible to truly think about collective intelligence as a form of solution to our problems. Thirdly, hierarchy and participation must be balanced. If top-down and bottom-up solutions are not simultaneously engaged in, we are going to be constantly experimenting, which is necessary, but a culture of participation in ensuring the ground, but also not analysis leading to paralysis, is important. And in order to move forward, we need to shape the rules of the game rather than to make them so restricted that possibilities of future development are avoided and foreclosed. And this requires fostering innovation and collaboration and sharing of the experience, which again, holding this conference in UAE is a great step because it shows UAE has always been willing to share, and we Afghans particularly are grateful for this. My last remarks are about leadership and management. Leadership in today's context is first and foremost to deal with uncertainty and be able to respond to constant change in context, yet have the sense of the medium term and the long term. Focusing on the medium term and long term is no longer just a discipline, but an art. We need to be able to be prepared for multiple scenarios and take stock of changing context and yet pursue goals. And what is important, particularly given the role of the UN in this gathering and convening of this forum, is to balance vision with delivery. The Secretary General's remarks on climate change are extraordinary. Do the UN agencies have the capacity to live up to that challenge? Are they capable of working with us, the governments, the people, and the networks? And this, given the scale, scope of the task, requires true sense of humility and a culture of learning. And it also, if we are to combine participation with hierarchy, we cannot have the view of the state and government as just being about rules of the game. The state in the urban sector must become entrepreneurial. It must have the capacity and nimbleness to respond to these. Let me conclude with two observations. One, to express our deepest sympathies to the people of China and Wuhan in particular, and to the people of Australia for the bushfires. Both signs of the changing world and the type of challenges that in the 21st century our large megacities will face. And then to say, we in Afghanistan, who've suffered for 40 years from unwanted conflict, imposed warfare, are embarking on a truly creative urban dialogue. Last month, I spoke personally to every district, 22 districts of the Kabul city, and to the 14 districts surrounding it. People truly have a sense of what their priorities are, and literacy or gender are not blocks. We must avoid the stereotype that certain inherited notions of culture will prevent us from engagement and participation. Trusting in people's diagnosis allows us to have the necessary coalition, and this is to bring networks of innovation with people's participation in forms of governance that would enable us. We are open to create the opportunities. We count on your cooperation and partnership to move forward together. Thank you.